Welcome to my presentation for my third project in the TDF class called Improve My Submissions. I would say my project is the platypus level because although I learned a lot of new tools and a lot of new interfaces in a very short amount of time, I do think my final project could be more creative, and for that reason, I do think it is a project platypus. The process was, first I went through all the examples given by the instructors, first of which allowed me to experiment with including instructions into my input, and I saw that when I added some random instructions, the system was able to pull results from the internet, and I wondered how I could incorporate this in my process. So moving the projects to be more aligned with what I needed to do for this class, which is, have it interact with my GitHub submissions, I found that I actually, if the instructions changed in this way and were more specific in this way, I couldn't really pull things from the internet. I had to pull them from my knowledge base. From there, I started experimenting with the different variables or the different sliders. I experimented with the temperature slider, and I noticed that it really impacted the succinctness of the responses that I got. But then when I experimented with the number of chunks and the similarity thresholds using these sliders, I found that although they didn't affect a whole lot of the final content, because the data set that I had working with was very limited, it did affect the processing time of the system as well as whether or not the system crashed when it was producing responses. So as you can see here, when these number slides were at really high amounts, the system did not work very well, but when they were lower, they did. Then I got into incorporating variables. I added two variables, which is a weak variable and a primary tool variable. And my system essentially is meant to go into my submissions, compare what I've written for that specific week and about that specific tool to the assignment requirements that the instructors have provided us, and then provide suggestions on how my submissions could improve. So for that, I created the variable week that corresponds to the week that the system should be looking into, as well as the primary tool or the tool that I was focusing on that week. When I first incorporated these, I found that the system didn't work. Although it could register that there existed two variables called week and primary tool, it wasn't able to pull in the values within these variables into the system. But that changed when I switched from a conversational prompt input into a singular prompt input, and then it was working fine. And then I started experimenting with the different verbs that I was using when I was giving it the instructions, and I found that the more active the verbs were, the more succinct and targeted the response I got were. So this is before I started using the verb analyze, when I was referring to the process that I wanted it to go through, and the feedback that it gave me was very, very general. But when I changed it into a more active verb, it got a lot more specific, which I wanted. And then when I experimented with the set of questions that the program asked us to experiment with, I found that it did exactly what I wanted it to do, which was to discern between the things that it was meant to be answering and the thing that it wasn't meant to be answering very successfully. The system flow for my project is as seen here. We have the input section on the far left, the concatenating section, the instruction section, the knowledge base section, the ChatGPT 4 section, as well as the output. And notice I use a lot of screens or monitors for debugging. The final demo of my project is as seen here. So I will ask it, how can I improve this week? Or how can update improve this week with the variables already set to be week 1 and the primary tool set to be the specific tool. And after running, and as you can see here, all the components are being engaged, it provides exactly the recommendation that I'm looking for. The speculation that I have is that it is an inaccessible tool because it does require a certain level of specialization and there's an expense attached to it, but I do think it has a lot of potential for building custom learning models to ensure that a more tailored approach to learning. And thank you for listening to my presentation.